So I'm going to give you the shortened version of how to look at a chart so that you can take the beginner's approach rather than going in depth and trying to figure out the full breadth of astrology, which is a lifelong science and something that I was just speaking to. I never get bored. I can't believe the depth and the width of this process, that the stars go on forever in every direction. And you look at a chart and the question is, how does this person show up in the world? And it becomes this fascinating access point. But I'm going to simplify it for you as a beginner. The sun sign of someone obviously is going to give you the first piece of information, whether they're an Aries or a Taurus or a Gemini. And that's just giving you that personality lens. How are they coming into the world? How do they appear? And you can describe that to someone very succinctly. And it's always, 90% of the time I should say, I wouldn't go always, consistent for the person. They'll say, boy, I really relate to that. And it'll be important for you to find your own language. How would you describe it? And when you're sitting with someone, you don't want to just start going on rote. You know, like, oh, well, you're an Aries. That means you're pushy and demand. No, you want to kind of feel them and go, you have a strong energy. You try to stay in people's eyes and not go from your head. The problem with astrology is people have a language with this, whether it's your sun squares your moon, sextiling your Venus, opposite your, in the third house, and it's inconjuncting your, like, thanks for sharing, there's not a heart contact. So it's very important that you stay with the person, you use the information, and then you track them while you're speaking and you're not just talking out of your head, because that really prevents this material from being meaningful. So you start with the sun sign, yeah, just reading that, giving them the information, and asking the question, always ask the question, can you relate to this? Does it fit? And then they're going to give you some feedback, because that's the dialoguing process. That's how astrology becomes more palatable, making sure they're talking too, and it's not just you laying, encyclopedia information that you've just read in Deborah Silverman's astrology class. You can immediately know the theme of their life. So if you know the person's got sun in the 11th house, you can say, wow, I bet you really have a love for community or for sharing the information, or you're advanced. Do you find yourself feeling separate? And it's always good to use leading questions. So you look at the house the sun is in, you find out the arena, and then you sort of engage and milk it, question it, ask them for information and see what they say. They're going to, just like yesterday when we turned around to the circle and asked everybody, what's your sun like in the 8th house? Well, yeah, I love the dark. What's your sun like in the 6th house? Well, I organize, and how it just becomes that quick. And then the language is theirs and you're not talking at them, but you're actually engaging. So this one's going to be less, for some people, less available to them. As soon as you start to describe their rising sign, for some people, it's what they can't relate to at all. They're going to go, gee, that's not familiar. Because why? Because the rising sign is your soul. And if someone's a personality-oriented character who's spending their life in the outer world, then their soul urge isn't going to be familiar. So that's why we call it the rising sign or the ascendant. It's what you're moving up towards. It's what the soul is meant to be aiming at. So you want to assist someone when you're looking at it and say, and then you find out what, right in that dialogue, they'll say to you, oh, I relate much more to what you just described as a rising sign is much more me than the first thing you said. And then you know, oh, they're more soul-oriented. They're more working out of their soul than they are their personality. Essentially, if I were to make life really simple, I would say to you, look at your rising sign and just start there. If you got nothing else out of this class, but you could figure out how to actively pursue your rising sign with wisdom, you'll have decided to have a soul-infused life. And that is what the esoteric law is go towards your soul and don't get as distracted by your personality. So it's like if the image we said yesterday was the personality's in the front seat and the soul's in the back seat, the game is to put the two sitting in tandem. Well, wouldn't it be great if the soul was driving for a little while and the personality sat next to the soul and said, okay, I'm going to let you take the lead. And the soul goes, I don't like to drive. And the personality goes, no, I really want to take your lead. And the soul goes, well, we're going to park for a while because I'm going to wait until I'm inspired to know where I want to go next. The soul is far more patient. It has a much slower pace. It doesn't have the same need to achieve and to be something. It's far more interested in hearing, what am I meant to be doing? How can I serve another person? Where's my selfless urge? How do I stay integral? It's a completely different orientation. So you want to look at their rising sign, and that's why the birth time is important. And if you don't know someone's birth time, this is always a question I get, you can still do a chart, because all the planets are going to stay in the same place during that day. But you won't know where they are, because the rising sign determines by the moment of your birth, tells you was the sun rising, was the sun setting. You know everything about the positioning of the chart from the birth time. But what we know for sure, no matter what time of the day, was we know for sure the sun was in Aquarius and the moon was in Taurus. That didn't change. So that's a good information. You can still do a lot of information without the birth time. As a beginner, you just put the chart in a circle and you make the rising sign Aries or anything you want. It's arbitrary. And just use the planets and where their relationships are. That will give you some more information. So you don't need the time, but certainly in the name of esoteric and the soul, it's dependent entirely on the accuracy of the time. Is this person missing an element? That's the first question. If there's a 0 or a 1, you really want to help that person. And you want to give them, and there's in the book, in the e-book, there's a complete list of what are the medicines, what are the tools that you use to grow a missing element. So for water people, you want to tell them, go see sad movies, learn how to cry. And I always tell people, if you're missing an element, you find a person in your world who embodies it, and you sit next to them. So if you have no fire, you go find a feisty character and you say, I'm going to spend the day with you and I'm going to pretend I'm you. And then after they leave, you just start pretending like, if I was fire, what would I do? And that's the role model in your head. Because if it's not your nature, if it doesn't come with your natural instinct, how do you learn it? So if they're missing an element, you want to help someone. If you're missing water, or your life lessons water, you want to keep paying attention to your emotional body. So that's a very important counsel that I give people that are missing water. What am I feeling right now? And I say stop. Right then and there I go, stop, take a breath, and in this instant, tell me what you're feeling. And it brings them right into the moment, and they start to realize, oh my God. And they usually say, I don't know. Because people that don't have water can't feel very easily. And then I say, just check out. And they go, use your body as your gauge. That's my next comment. And they'll go, I'm feeling a little bit tense. That's a perfect step. That's like the first step. Okay, so now we've tracked you. You're in your body. You're aware. Or they're saying, I'm really excited. This is so much fun. I'm having the best time. Well, that's another tag of the feeling body. So people that are missing water need the assistance. Go cry. I tell them, I give them a list of sad films. Find your feeling in the moment and find someone who's really emotional that you could sit next to, who you know is comfortable with their feeling body. If they're missing air entirely, I say to those people, you have to journal. You have to learn the skill of hearing your own voice because you're not talking. You're keeping everything inside. And if the person, I say to them, go find a friend who's really social and go spend the day with them and watch how they engage with the telephone operator on the telephone. Then they go to the bank and they talk to the bank teller, and then they go to the restaurant and become best friends with the waitress. That's air people. They just tickle everybody. And you pretend. That's what I encourage air people to do. So it's very important for them to journal and get their own voice, to find people who are social. And the third and most important one about air is to tell them to ask questions. The biggest missing factor for people that don't have air is they don't know how to engage another person in a conversation. And the trick of any master of air, anybody you meet that's got great air, is they ask a million questions. So tell me, where are you from? And what do you do? And how long were you married? And when did you get married? And how's your kids? And how many kids do you have? And next thing you know, the person. So that's air. How do we engage another? Ask them questions. It's the quickest way. And I always teach people, if you don't know how to have a conversation or be at a party, it's a short answer. If someone's missing earth, you want to say, this is very important, go get a routine. Like, I don't care what you do, but be consistent. So if you're going to have breakfast every morning, if people don't have earth, they need to create, what are you having for breakfast, and have it every morning for a month and start practicing routines. If it's going to be going for a walk at the end of the day, if it's getting your plants, going out and buying plants, because people that have no earth can't do plants, and start watering them and make a relationship with that practical area of earth. I say to them, go clean your closets. Like I'll say to somebody, you need to go home. You have no earth in your chart. You have no respect for the physical world. It's not your fault, but you've got to cultivate it. So go home and take care of that practical world. And of course, you know, if they don't have ways of taking care of their money, I say, you know what, go hire a financial planner. Like, it's nothing's wrong with saying you can't do it. But if you can't do it, go get help. The other thing that earth people, they tend to either be cluttered or they're so fastidious, they get, and I say to earth people that are preoccupied with it, leave a mess. Like, leave the house today and don't make the bed. They go, I can't. I go, just practice, just try the exercise of realizing that none of that matters. You really learn that quick when you are in a crisis, that all that practical detail stuff that makes you feel safe is just, it's just extra, it's excess. What really matters is being in the moment and being present and accepting your internal state. It's funny. So someone that's lacking earth, I give them the practical exercise, and of course, find the people in the world that you know are really good at this and follow them around. When someone's missing fire entirely, I tell them to go get music and put it on really loud and sing, whether it's in the car or it's in your house. They've got to open up their throat chakra. People that are missing fire can't get angry. They get angry and they start to cry immediately. They don't have comfort in their body with pushing. So if they can start learning how to use their voice, especially in singing, because when you sing loud and you're comfortable being loud, in the name of joy or pleasure, it doesn't take you to the fear part. And then you start getting comfortable, wow, I can move the chi. Or going and getting exercise. I will tell people that are missing fire, you have to exercise. Like, there's no question here. If you don't move your fire, you're gonna get sick and you're gonna find yourself lethargic. When someone's missing fire and has no energy, I always counsel them. I say exercise is exorcism. Because if you're holding on to stuff and it gets stuck in your body, it's only exercise that gets that stuff out. Last and most important point, where's Saturn in the person's chart? First, what element is it? That's the first, this is the one where if you leave today and you don't understand the complexity of astrology, you'll certainly understand the simplicity of the elements. So where's Saturn? What element did Saturn land in your chart? And if it's water, we know you came, as we described yesterday, to learn about your feeling body. Either you feel too much or you don't feel at all. If it's an air, you're either thinking and talking all the time or you couldn't care less about people and you want them to go away. And if it's earth, you're either totally brilliant at money and you're totally stingy and you're caught in the detail of it, or you don't know how to take care of it and your plants are all dying. And if it's fire, you can't confront people, you can't handle how big you are and how loud you are, and you don't want to have conflict, or you're too loud and bossy boots and aggressive. It goes one of two ways. I always feel like there's a fork in the road when it comes to these extreme Saturn influences. It's one or the other. So you just figure out, that's the short version. We're doing beginner astrology here. That's the short version. What element is my Saturn in? Or your Saturn in? And if you say to a client, listen, they're going to always say to you, oh my God, you nailed me. And be careful, because this is a thing that we resist. So when you go to tell somebody you're missing fire, you know, if we're talking to someone and they're like, I don't want to talk about that. I hate that part of myself. That's what they'll say. And you say, well, this is really what you came to learn. Nothing's wrong. And the point of astrology or good psychology is we're here to help you refine and aim at joy. My big joke. The president of the Jews for Joy Club, and I have no members. There's so few people that want to be happy on this planet. And it takes a lot to give people permission to say it's really okay to be comfortable in your own skin and be yourself. Be yourself. Sun and Mercury always travel together. So Mercury's either one sign in front, one sign behind, or in the same sign. If we find someone has Mercury in the same sign, you can be sure that person's a thinker. If their sun sign and their Mercury are in the same place, their minds keep on going all the time. And then you want to help counsel them how to subdue or quiet that impulse to think all the time. If it's one sign behind or in front of, that's a better indicator that there's some other point of view that's helping them, not be extreme, whatever their sign is. If there's anything from Jupiter to Saturn to Neptune to Uranus to Pluto, any of those planets that are conjunct the sun or the moon or the rising, or opposite the sun, that's equally important. That's the only one that really matters. If it's opposite the sun, the outer planets. That's a very large theme. Now, as a beginner, you can take that into your own account, and if you meet somebody who's got, for example, let's just do it, they have Pluto on their sun. What we know immediately, that person's intense. They are not living their life in a lukewarm fashion, I promise you. And as soon as you say that to them, that you're intense, to a Pluto person, Pluto on the sun, they're going to go, wow, thank you. Thank you for giving me permission to acknowledge that's what happens to me everywhere I go. What a relief. Or if they have Saturn on their sun, let's talk about that one. Saturn on their sun, they're going to be this really disciplined, hard-nosed, serious character who doesn't know how to have fun. So if you meet with someone with Saturn on the sun, you immediately say to them, you need some permission. You got to tell that little culprit to calm down. If you meet somebody with Neptune on the sun, they're dreamy. They're off planet. They have these crazy antennas that go woo, and they empathically take everything into their body. As soon as you tell someone that who has Neptune on their sun, I can guarantee you they're going to feel understood. Is that what that is that I feel all the time? Is that what all those funny energies are that I pick up? Is that why I don't like to be around too many people? Because I start picking up things? Ooh. So, and then of course, if they have Jupiter on their sun, opposite their sun, on their ascendant, that's a very, very lucky, it's the person born under a lucky star. That's always fun to say to someone, oh, you're so lucky. They're like, thank you. And they always say to you, you will see it every single time. It's just crazy. That's so true. I do have so much luck. I can't tell you how things always work out for me in the nick of time. You're like, somebody's watching after you. It looked like Jupiter. Uranus and the sun, they are totally, completely nonconformist. And they can be as normal and straight as can be in their outer appearance, but internally they feel completely different. And it's disorienting for them. Like, why can't I fit in? So you give them permission. That's really, in short, what astrology is permission slips. You know when you were at school and you'd go in for your teacher and say, can I have a permission slip to get out of class? And they'd write you the little thing and hand it. And then you walk in the halls like, can I see your permission slip? I have a hall pass. That's what astrology is. I'm giving permission slips out every single day. You're you. It's not going away. You're stuck with old what's her name. So you may as well figure out how to get along with her, because there's no divorce in heaven. He's stuck with you for the rest of these lifetimes. And the more you understand your nature, the quicker you're going to get to being part of my club. Whether you're Jewish or not, you're welcome. You can be in the Jews for Joy Club can just skip the Jews part and be the Joy Club. I'm not attached at all to your last name, but I would sure love to see more people in the club. And the only way to get them in is to give you acceptance that who you are is okay, no matter what your childhood was, no matter what your storyline is. It was all part of the grist for the mill. It's exactly what you signed up for. I don't know what you were thinking, but that's how it goes down here. It's one of my favorite lines. I'd love to write a book. That's how it goes down here. They have the strangest rules. The game is completely over my head, which made me into an astrologer. What is going on? Okay, so those would be the steps. The most important is what sun sign, what house the sun is in, the soul, the elements, and then Saturn. That's the shortened version. In your booklets, there's a longer version if you're really going to go ahead and do a whole hour with someone. But if you're just looking at someone's chart by yourself and you're working with the client and you're wanting to know how can I get into them or understand them, as soon as you get that Saturn piece, where did they come to learn? That gives you a lot of information. As soon as you understand what house the sun is in, you can go, well, it's no surprise you're this way. And you get to give them a permission slip. I would love to, give you all a little package at the end of learning astrology where you hand them out. These are called the Astrology How to Fall in Love with Yourself slips. You eat this when you're done. Take a little dot and drop it in. And suddenly you go, ooh, I feel so much better. Because that's essentially all this is an opportunity for you to be who you are. And then you're going to have to delve into the aspects and looking at the chart and seeing how are these planets relating to each other. And that's where those cards come in that we talked about, using your cue cards and being able to see if Saturn and Venus don't get along, what does that mean? Well, Saturn's restrictions and Venus's love, they might have restrictions in love if there's a square. And you're going to have to start practicing how do these planets relate to each other and how do I interpret if they're positively related. If Saturn loves being with Venus, then we have discipline, Saturn, the old man, loving Venus, and that's usually an indication of a very strong relationship in a lifetime. If Saturn's not loving Venus, it's usually an indication that they're not going to have an easy relationship in this lifetime. And that's just the nature of fate. The question of, can you change it? Yes, of course. Once you're aware, this is really the advantage of astrology. Once you're aware of these tendencies, there is an opportunity for you to change the story by using it right between your head. I can accept my fate, and I can rewrite the storyline. So if I'm not doing, let's say the person finds out, wow, I didn't get to have kids this life. I can see it. My fifth house, my fourth house, there's lots of squares. We're not going to go there today, how you'd interpret that. Or let's give you one that you could tell. Let's say they have no earth in their chart. And you go, and they say to you, money's been an issue this whole lifetime. And you go, yeah, that's not what you came in to learn. And there's Saturn's in Earth too, for example. So then you go, wow, you're not going to have that sense of security this life. Well, that doesn't mean they can't downsize and minimize their life and live within their means and create some, means you got to change their dream from thinking they're going to be a millionaire so they don't feel frustrated their whole life with the little amount they make. But you can certainly reframe it for them and say, this is what you're making. This is what your boundaries are. Live with it and find your pleasure in it. So that's how we accept our fate, is we change the internal point of view of how we see it rather than complaining. And I think so much in life we argue with God, and good luck, because she don't really care. I mean, it's not that she doesn't care, but the lessons are set. And there's places in our life that are very solid. So if someone has no water and they can't feel very much and they come to see me, I get to say to them, listen, you have to practice the muscle of feeling compassion. Go ahead and watch the sad films, but don't be surprised if you're sitting in the middle of a funeral and you can't feel. It's okay. And that permission slip changes the judgments. So we're not going to be able to change the outer circumstance so much as we can change the inner dialogue and the point of view of the person as they look at their life or themselves. That's really what this work is about. Because so much of this is, I meet someone that has no earth and they simply can't be grounded. And I can teach them grounding exercises, but it's full-on work to get them into the place of feeling in their body, feeling stable. Or someone has no fire and they just don't want to exercise. They don't want to have to get up and go. And I have to say, listen, if you don't do it, you're going to feel naturally comfortable being who you are. But if you do it and you stretch yourself, you create a wider breadth of being able to be happy. So it's a matter really, what I see so much in my work is what is the level of this person's interest in being of value to their life? Like, are they soulfully driven? And anyone watching these videos or doing this work, you're obviously interested in contributing to the planet or you wouldn't be listening. So that's the good news. The bad news is you probably think you should be doing more, or you think your life's not right, or the way that it's gone doesn't seem right, or gee, why didn't I get to have the 13 kids I wanted, or the family I wanted, or, well, that's just a done deal. There's nothing you can do to change that, except that you can accept your fate and then create another world if you want. So you borrow some kids, you rent the neighbors. I always tell people, go volunteer. If you don't have any kids, go find some. Doesn't mean just because you didn't have them, doesn't mean you can't help finding a way to. If you don't have a way of feeling meaningful in your life, go find a volunteer position where someone really needs your help. But we get lazy. That's really the biggest issue. The human mind, by design, has a lethargic component to it. It's built to resist. This is the nature of Alice Bailey's work. The personality, get ready, resists the soul. That's what happens. And your rising sign is your soul. So if you are consciously willing to drive towards your soul, you're going to avoid that. But most people avoid their soul. The soul only wants to be simply in the process of life, regardless of the pain or the pleasure, the success or the failure. It doesn't have an attachment. It just wants to give. Does that sound like fun? I think I wrote that in Facebook lately. I said, the personality, I was describing it, the soul has, this personality wants security and wants family and friends and people, and the soul wants nothing else but to give. Who wants to aim for the soul? And then people wrote back and said, I do. But it's only the spiritual people that are interested. And you have to know you're the exception to the rule, because by design, we are built for resistance. So when it comes time for the diet, when it comes time for exercise, when it comes time to save money, it's like, oh, do I have to? And the word is discipline. And what is discipline but discipleship? The only reason why any one of you are going to do the work that's required, and that's your Saturn, is because you have discipleship. You know who you're working for, and you're disciplined because you know who your boss is, and you want to be of service to that which created us. It's the only motivation I can get someone to do. Otherwise, without discipline or the spiritual memory, the discipleship, there is indulgence. And we're built to indulge. Everything from the minute you wake up in the morning, you walk into the stores and there's the sugar. I always love that when you get to the gas station, you're going for the gas and then there's this little whole giant counter with every color you ever saw and every little can. You're like, no, who put that there? Like, no, they don't. Instead of having like healthy nuts and having a really, giving you the clear, fresh water coming out of a mountain or having it in the bottles. No, it's all built. Our whole society is built to go, buy me, buy me, buy me. You walk through a mall, that's not soul, that's personality, and it's everywhere. So it takes a very particular discipleship or discipline to choose to be healthy. To actually say, I'm going to do exercise, or I'm going to take care of my money, or I'm going to clean my closet. Well, who cares, says the personality. Leave it a mess. The soul's going, okay, I guess you're going to win again. And then we sit on the couch. So it's a real disciplined practice of will, is another word, will. Do you have the spiritual will to get yourself off the couch? It's a good question. To come out of the negativity. And that's the value of teachers and reading and going for counsel, because we need someone to help us, give us a little push. Otherwise, left to our own devices, we are built for destruction. That's the sad part of the design that I've discovered. And Alice Bailey says this. The nature of growth, according to Alice Bailey, the initiation process is her language, is we learn through crisis. And built for our own devices, we will not go towards growth. We will go towards security and repetition. I don't know. I wish I could call them and say, why didn't you make it so that we learned our lesson the first time round? You have to repeat things how many times? And what happens when people are mean to each other? Can't they just sit down and talk about it after? No. And what happens when you have a gripe with someone you never got forgiven and it stays around for the next 35 lifetimes and you bump into them in your next life? How do you clear that? A little instruction manual would have been helpful, or a little kindness ritual where you say to the person when you're leaving, I'm so sorry and you're so sorry and have a good life and I'm so glad we had this time together and I'm so glad it's over. Like, wouldn't that be a great practice where you get a gift to the person when you leave? We did a great round. But no, we finish things with like, ha la ha. Yeah, and then big X's. And then the next lifetime you bump into, oh, what's his name? Not you again. But they disguise it. That's the tricky part. They make him totally attractive. Or sometimes you meet someone, you go, ooh, I have a bad feeling, but you do it anyway. Because it's karma, because we didn't have enough consciousness to stay awake, to actually be in our heart and be kind enough to say, what am I supposed to be learning here? If that was the point of view, if everything you did and all of this astrology, the question is, what am I supposed to be learning here? That's the soul's question. I am a student of life. This is the soul. This is your rising sign, whatever your rising sign is. I'm a student of life, and I'm here to learn. And I'm humbled because I know I'm goofy. I'm the first one to admit I'm goofy. That's the first step. Admitting humbly. I can't quite get it right, but I'm doing the best I can. And the place where I'm doing the best I can is really good. It's not bad. It's the best I can do, and I'm giving it all I have. And the most important part is my heart's open. That's the promise. That's a soulful life. But if your heart's not open, you look at old what's her name, or what's his name, or your dad, and you go, ee! I guarantee you they're going to send you him next time. So be careful who you have that energy with. It's incomplete, because those people stick to you like Velcro. They follow you around like flies on you know what. You don't want that to happen. You don't want them following you around in your next lifetime. Like you make an amends to your mom and dad and you go when they're dead. I'm so thankful, bye-bye. Completion. And all those mean things I said while you were alive, I'm just kidding. Can we do okay in the next life? How about we not do the next life? Just carry on. It's been a pleasure. But that only happens when your heart's open. As soon as there's a little crypt, you can see it when I'm working with someone and I find out what was the relationship that happened during one big question I asked, the last relationship you were in, tell me about it. And they go, oh, you want to hear about that story? And if they start going, and I say, how long ago? Oh, it was 7 years ago. And you're still singing that song? And you haven't forgiven them yet? Well, good luck, because they're coming back. Whether it looks like them or a new form of them, likely you're going to have to learn the lesson again. Well, that gets them all excited. Then they start listening. What do you mean learn that lesson again? What did you tell me to do? Tell me. So it's the motivation that God or life uses, is the crisis or the pain is what draws our attention to healing. What if we chose to get healed without pain? There's a novel idea. What if you chose to stay awake without the alarm clock waking you up? And that's why we wake up in the morning, we do meditation, or we do prayer, or we do yoga, or we do exercise, because we're praying. Let this body be a vehicle for spirit. I promise I'll be good. Be nice to me. That's how I think of it. I'm like, don't hit me. Don't throw things. No alarm clocks. I promise I'll wake up. I really try my best to stay. And as soon as I feel myself getting like, I turn on the question, what am I supposed to be learning here?